Hey guys, this is Tom from 6 Foot Networks, and here's video number 2 of the CentOS Linux 8 mini-series that I'm doing. It's not really a mini-series, but more of a how-to. In the last video, I installed CentOS 8 into a virtual machine running on VMware Fusion. On the screen right here, you see that very virtual machine, which I'm going to work with. I am going to make this full screen, so that way I believe the text will be a little bit more legible in the video, hopefully. If not, reach out and I can clarify anything that's not clear. So in this video, I sort of decided in the last video to go forth and install a DNS server. And there's actually some ulterior motives for this video. One, I've been working with a client who is running a very old DNS server that was built probably about 10 years ago, a little bit more than 10 years ago, and through the years it's been upgraded more and more, but it's time to get off of that and migrate all of the A records over and basically start new and fresh with a clean system. So this video is basically a proof of concept, and what I'm doing is I have my notes here from my previous DNS deployment that I did in CentOS 6, which was 2 versions ago, many years ago. So I'm going to actually try this, and I'm going to take you guys along for the ride, because I don't know honestly if this will work or not, but I'm pretty certain that the packages are the same, meaning the bind service as well as the zone files and the configurations. I'm pretty sure they're the same. From what I've read, they are identical, but we're going to take the next step and do our due diligence. So this video might be a little bit longer than it would be if you were just going forth in, say, CentOS Linux 7 or 6, but I want to make sure that what I'm seeing in this virtual machine is actually what needs to be there. So I'm going to compare this with my notes, and feel free to drop a line below. Give me a like if you like where this is going, and we'll go from there. So for now, let's log in. So pretty much everything on the administrator side in Linux has to be done as root. So we're going to do root. We're going to put in the password. Hopefully I get it right this time. Yes, it is correct. So the first thing we're going to do, because this is a basic install of CentOS 8, we're going to run the install of bind. In fact, we're going to install all of bind. And to do that, we're going to type DNF -y install. You can put the -y anywhere in that command, so you can do DNF install bind -y. If you don't do the Y, which actually I can take it out, it'll actually ask you to confirm to install it. So the -y just basically says yes, answer yes. So if I just hit it without the -y, I will have to respond to the question that CentOS is about to give me. And so these are all the packages, and this is why I did not do -y, because I wanted to see this. And it looks actually like it installs a few other things along with bind. So get some libraries, some extra packages, some development tools, as well as MariaDB, which is a database, Python 3, OpenSSL. So yeah, we get a few things here. So yeah, 32 packages. So is this okay? This is where the -y would come in, right? So because we didn't hit the -y, we're gonna hit Y there, hit enter or return. Since I'm on a Mac, it'll say return on the keyboard. and off we go. This shouldn't take very long. And just like that, we're done. So the next step is a controversial point. At least for me it is. I've had several engineers that I've worked with in the past tell me that servers that run behind firewalls and whatnot don't need firewalling. I completely disagree. I believe every system on every network should have a firewall in place. There's a whole bunch of reasons for that, but I'm not going to get to those. I'm not going to get into those because I feel like, to each his own. Because this is something that I'm hoping to do for production, I'm going to keep the firewall enabled. I'm also going to use Network Manager and whatever comes with Linux out of the box, just because I feel like, there's a reason why these developers put it in. There shouldn't be a reason for me to go and remove stuff that, if you know what you're doing and you take the time to figure it out, you can make it work. Granted, you might increase the amount of troubleshooting that you have to do in the end or whatnot, if something breaks or if you can't connect to something. But you know what? Again, if you're doing things right, just do it right. That's a personal opinion of mine that I've run with, and I think that it's really the only way to go. So we're going to make some firewall commands, and excuse my typing. I am in a weird situation here where my laptop is kind of crooked and I'm not really flush in front of it, so not to mention I have my notes in front of me and all that stuff, so just forgive my typing. So the first command I'm going to issue here is a permanent command where zone facing public, I'm going to add the service DNS. So that was successful. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to issue the firewall cmd reload command, so that way it can reload that firewall and that rule will now become active. Okay, so now DNS should have a permanent place inside the firewall's heart, so to say. What I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, we're going to change directory and go into the etc directory of CentOS, and what I will do is I will show you all of this stuff that's in here, at least what's relevant to this video. So this is what a base install of the /etc directory should look like, and you can see in the middle of the screen. Now obviously my mouse doesn't work because this is a virtual machine, so I'm just gonna leave my mouse on the corner. In the middle of the screen under N you see named or name D. It's actually name D, for D stands for daemon. So named chroot, name.conf, name.rfc1912.zones, and then the root key that goes with the named service as well. What I normally do is I normally create duplicates of these files before I go monkeying around inside of them, and there's a good reason for that too. You want to have a state that you can go back to if you really hose your configuration files. So you just want to have a state that will work. So right now we know that the named service is running and that bind is happy and that DNS DNS won't really work because we don't have any zone files created yet, but at least the service starts and the system is not flipping out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to literally cp, and you can use tab completion. I usually do, I'm really having a hard time typing, so I apologize for that. We're going to put that right into its same spot, except we're going to name it named.conf.backup, or BKUP is what I usually do. So now we're gonna copy /etc/named.conf to /etc/named.conf.backup, named.conf.backup. That's a mouthful. Okay, and then we're gonna do essentially the same thing for the RFC zones. And if you hear that beep, that old style beep, that is the auto completion not liking what I'm doing. So .zones.bkup. Okay, copy that. So now if we do an ls on Etsy, we can see in the middle there's a backup file for the conf, and there's a backup file for the RFC 1912. So that's kind of the prerequisite, how I do things. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to now kind of shift gears, and I'm going to check and see what my IP address is. Now, because the server's in a virtual machine, I have just DHCP going to it, so it's going to have, if I do IP addressing, I literally have, two interfaces. The first one's a loopback that's denoted by the LO right next to the 1. Number 2 is my actual interface. It's got an IP address of 192.168.93.138. So that is what my server's IP address is. So typically this should be static. You do not ever want a server dynamically changing an IP address on you. So because this is in a test environment, I'll leave it go, but just note that the next time you turn this machine on, if you're doing this on a future production server, please set an IP address. And there's plenty of articles on how to do that. Just, like I said, if you're going to do something, do it right, because you're going to have a lot of heartache if IP addresses change and configurations break and so on and so forth. So also set a host name. In fact, we're going to do that right now. We're going to do host name, hostname CTL, set dash host name. Actually, I think it's set host name, and this is just going to be whatever, DNS01. And I think we already did this in the installer, but oh, I think I might have been right the first time. Okay, perfect. So I goofed that one. Forgive me for that. Okay, so now that we have a host name, the previous host name was CentOS VM test 01, as you can see on this line right after root, because that's what it read when we booted it up. Okay, so now we're going to fix the, let's see, we set host name, we have an IP address, we're just going to leave that at that. Now we're going to, let's configure, this isn't like Cisco iOS where you can just write comments in. So let's configure the resolve.conf. Yeah. So I use Nano. Feel free to use Vi or Cat or whatever you'd like, whatever your flavor of editor is. go ahead and use that. So nano etc resolve.conf, and then, oh, look at that, nano's not installed. Well, that's interesting. I thought, well, you know what, I'm gonna need nano. I can't live without nano. It used to be installed, but at least I thought it was. Maybe I missed it. But yeah, so if we do, there we go. So now things are generated by the network manager. We have a search. We have a name server, which I don't remember what the IP address is, so let's go back to that command. So we have 93.138. So if we go back to this, 192.168.93.138. So this would be 93.138. And then we're going to do Control X on the Mac, save it, yes. File name, yes, we're going to write that. And then after you do this part, you need to disable, if I recall correctly, you need to disable the network manager's DNS auto configuration, because that will dynamically change the resolve.conf file. So let's go into, let's see if I remember this. So we're going to use nano again, and this is under etc. Pretty much everything we're working with is under etc. So network manager and network manager conf, pretty blue colors. We're going to add the line. I usually add it at the bottom. We're going to add the line that says DNS equals none. So yeah, and then again we're going to do Control X, Y, and then enter or return, and then let's reload the network manager. And oops, manager. Okay, so that should prevent the network manager from making strange DNS changes on the fly. Usually at boot is when these when this is read in, or when the services get restarted. So, you know, again, cover your bases, right? So systemctl enable. Okay, so what's this command? So we're basically telling the system to enable the named service, or the named service, depending on which part of the world you're from. I usually say named because I know that it's a daemon. But we're going to enable it, and basically now we have a symlink where systemd will launch the named service at boot. So every time you start up the server, this service is going to run. You want that. Okay, so that is pretty much it. Okay, so what did we do? Let's go back. We basically installed bind and all of its utilities. We made the firewall commands to allow DNS to work, and then we duplicated the named conf file, the configuration file for both named as well as the RFC 1912 zone file. So that way you have a backup in case you break something and you need to go back. You got to set an IP address, you got to set a host name. That should really be done like in the last video. Servers are really picky, services are really picky, and you want to be sure that your IP and host name never changes for the life of that server. If you need to change IPs for whatever reason, it's actually easier to just spin up a new server and migrate your records, because I think in that process you can break a lot of things, and it may or may not be, you know, it may or may not be a party for you when you're sitting there, in the middle of the night trying to figure out what's wrong with a service that, is 10 years old or whatever. So, which is actually what the heart of this video is. Okay, so moving on. Now that we have this service running and it'll run at boot. Oh, by the way, we also, modified the resolve.com file. We disabled the network manager's DNS auto config that happens every time network manager starts, and we enabled the service at startup. I know I was going through through what we've done so far. Now that DNS is installed and the service is set to run with the OS at boot time, you really have to choose what mode you want to run the server in. So, as far as I remember, and I could be wrong, but I think there are 5 types or modes that this service can run in, and I'm going to try to recall all of them. First one is a forwarding server, where all the queries are just forwarded. Caching only server, where it's literally all it's doing is caching. A root server, which we're not really working with, and then of course the single and secondary servers, which are the authoritative servers that are used in a first install. So you can probably guess we're going to do a single server because this installation is just one machine. So if you need configuration information for some of the other ones, my best guess would be to research the CentOS community forums, where posts are pretty much added on a daily basis on how to do certain things, and that might be a good resource for you. But for this example in this video, we're going to do single server. Okay, so in this case, it'll be an authoritative DNS server, which will be in charge for all name resolutions in the domain we have chosen. So in this case, the domain will be 6footnetworks.com. So basically, here's what we're going to do. First step is to enable the listening for the service on port 53. So this is usually where you also restrict interfaces if you have more than one network interface going to your server. If this is on a physical box, say that has 4 network ports and all of them just happen to be enabled for whatever reason, this is where you specify the interface and the port that you're going to allow your queries on. So that's all done under the named.conf file. So let's go back and edit that file. It's under etc named conf. Enter. So this is the default configuration. Now remember, this is the file that we made a copy of, so that way we wouldn't have issues if we broke the system. So here's what I'm going to do. For simplicity's sake, I am going to comment out by adding the number sign or pound sign, or God, if you're from this millennium, you could say hashtag. My God, never thought I'd say that. So by holding shift and the number 3 on your keyboard, you will literally add the tic-tac-toe box right in front of listen on v6. We don't really care about IPv6 at the moment. We are just going to worry about IPv4. So listen on port 53 is already on, and what we're going to do here is we're literally going to add this guy's IP address, which I can't remember. I should have written it down. But in fact, what I'm going to do is I am going to write it down. So I'm going to exit out of this. I'm going to save the changes that I did make, and I'm going to run that IP address command again. This time we're going to take a post-it, for God's sake, and we're going to just literally write 93.138 because that's how we do it. That's how Daddy does it. Okay, so now we're going to go back up into the config file, and we're going to add that IP address. Now you can see kind of how my brain goes all over the place, so, forgive me for, having to exit out, go back in, and whatnot. So, 192.168.93.138. Okay, because that is its IP address. And then we have to allow query, which is already there. And we're going to add, again, actually for allow query, we want the whole network to be able to see this. So 192.168.93.0/24, because we're just going to do a 24-bit mask on this, which basically is the same as it's CIDR notation for a Class C network with the subnet mask of 255.255.255.0. So we're gonna leave that, and actually I have to change also recursion. Since this is an authoritative server, I just noticed that it says yes. You do not want authoritative servers to be recursive servers. Okay, what does that mean? Okay, the option recursion no makes sure that the DNS will not provide an answer to a particular query that it doesn't have a record for or is not authoritative for. It will delegate to the upstream servers or root DNS servers if necessary for those unknown names or IPs. Does that make sense? You really do not want an authoritative server to be recursive. You just want it to forward requests to the upstream server. It's really the best way to go. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to save this by hitting Control X on the Mac. Yes, we want to save it. That's the file name we want, and that's it. That's it for the config file. Let me move this IP address somewhere because I have it on a post-it, and something tells me I'm going to lose it in a matter of seconds, and then we're going to have to go back and get the IP address. Okay, so now what we're going to do is let's specify our zone files. Before we reboot the service, let's do the zone files so we can save ourselves some typing. So basically, we need to configure a forward and a reverse zone. So basically, what's a forward and reverse zone? So in DNS, you have a forward zone that resolves a name to an IP address. Okay, so for example, a forward zone would have a record for, say, google.com, and then google.com would have an IP address, right? So basically, you typing in google.com means nothing to the internet. DNS is what takes that name, that human readable and a name that you can remember, and translates it to an IP address, right? So that's what forward zones are for, because it's forwarding, the request from a host name to an IP address. Now, a reverse zone is exactly the opposite. You're basically resolving an IP address to a host name. So each record in a forward zone should have a matching reverse record in it. So anything you do in a forward zone, you should literally do in a reverse zone. It's good practice. I've seen some DNS servers where it's just forward only, forward zone only, and I'm still not sure if those DNS servers are crippled by design, because they're literally 50% complete, if you ask me. So I usually do in the forward zone, I usually do in the reverse zone exactly what I do in the forward zone. Because I think, again, if you're going to do something and spend the time doing it, why not just do it? Okay, so here's what we're going to do. We're going to add some lines into the named zone file, or the RFC 1912 zone file. So we're going to do nano, Etsy, and then if I remember the name right, it's literally named.rfc 1912 zones. Yeah, that looks right. At least the name got filled in by the autocomplete. So this is what the default zone looks like. The zones file looks like. I'm getting a little flustered. So keeping everything straight in my head is a challenge these days. So what we're gonna do is we're going to literally we can do it at the bottom, it's no big deal. We're going to add the zones, or the zone, the forward zone and the reverse zone for the entire server. So literally what we do is we type zone and then quote the domain name, which in this case is 6footnetworks.com, end quote, capital IN, and then just like up top here, you're going to do this little curly bracket. You're going to hit enter. You're going to tab over. You're going to say type. It's literally just like it is up there. Type master, semicolon, and then we're going to do enter, tab, file, quote. What are we going to call this? We can just call this forward, just for fun. Forward.zone. And then quote. And then, just like with everything else in configuration file, do not forget the semicolon. Ever. You will break the server if you literally forget to add that semicolon on the end. And don't replace it with a colon. Semicolon. And then we're gonna do allow update, and because this is gonna be a master, we're gonna do just like above. We're gonna do none, semicolon, curly bracket, semicolon, and that should be it for that. So we're gonna give an end bracket, semicolon, and then we're going to hit enter, and we're going to do zone, and then this is going to be a reverse zone. So literally everything about this is going to be backwards. So because the IP ends with 93.138, we're going to do 138.93.192. Oops, that's not going to work. 168.192. And then we're going to do .in-addr.arpa. And then somewhere there is a I forgot the quote at the front. And then here is again the in. That. Here we're going to do again type master semicolon. And I'm typing really slow and rereading everything so I don't have to go back and undo whatever mistake I make because I'm rushing. Oh, file. And here's going to be the reverse dot zone, which is fine, just for the name of the file. And then we're going to do allow dash update none. Yeah. Oops, what did I forget? There we go. And then we close all that with one of these doohickeys. And actually, you know what? Now that I'm looking at it, I am wondering if that reverse zone is correct. It doesn't look right. So let me check, because I may have done it wrong. Let me look at my notes from years past. Notes. I believe that the reverse zone, yeah, so it's zone IP address backwards, so it is 138.93.168.192 in-addr ARPA. Yeah, so that I doubted myself, but it's correct. So we're gonna hit Control X, Y, yes. Alright, so what did we just do? So we just told named where the zones were, and we did that by specifying a file name by the file breakdown. So the forward zone is going to be called forward zone, and the reverse zone is going to literally be called reverse zone. We disallowed update to both. Why is that? So the option of allow update refers to DNS dynamic updates. That means an application essentially in a host can add DNS records on the fly. For security considerations, this is really disabled by default, which is why all of the stuff above it says none, and should really be done by a system administrator. You can add records manually. That way DNS doesn't get all messed up when somebody changes a host name or an IP address or something, and the system updates, and then everything is broken, and then a fire breaks out in the server room, and then somebody gets fired, or literally something silly like that. So besides, there's really no reason to have outside influence on your DNS system. Okay, so moving on. We did the zones. Now let's actually create the zone files. Why don't we? So let's create the forward and reverse zones, and those are going to be living actually under var. So let's cd into var, and let's see if there's already a named. Yeah, there's a named directory. Let's see what's inside this directory. So we have, let's see, some name.ca, named empty, name.localhost, named.loopback. So we're actually going to create two files that are going to be called forward.zone and reverse.zone. So, just like we inferred, from the directory option in the named.conf configuration file, which you can still see in the middle left area of the screen there. Not really much of a mouse there, so we'll just have to, leave the mouse be. So how do we do this? How about we just use touch? Because we're in the directory, we can literally create the directory like this, forward.zone, and then touch reverse.zone. Now make sure that these names actually match what you put up top. You can replace it with whatever you want, but for this example, forward and reverse just made sense to me. So now I just used the touch utility to create two files. So if I do ls again, you now see that we have a forward zone right next to the dynamic blue dynamic word. It's forward zone, and then right before the last slaves that's in blue, you see reverse zone. So now we can actually create our zone files. So now let's modify this. And actually, you could have just gone into and actually we don't need sudo here because we're root. Normally, when I'm administering servers, I'm not using root to do all these changes, but to save myself some typing, I logged in as root for this example. Okay, so nano, let's do the forward zone first. There's nothing in it. So let's start by putting in the actual proper forward zone files. Okay, here's what I must say. I'm not inventing any of this. This is overly documented online, and you can literally copy it verbatim and just modify it. Because I'm doing a virtual machine, I'm not SSH'd into it. If I was SSH'd into this, I could copy and paste everything from my notes, but I wanted you guys to get the full experience of Tom brain exploding into this virtual machine to try to get DNS running, if that makes any sense. I'm literally trying to give you guys what I see when I do a brand new server, and it's been a long time since I've done this. I've done a few of them. I think over the last, I'd say 10 years, I've probably done maybe 15 deployments of DNS in production that are, most of them are still running actually. I think only 3 of them were shut down or decommissioned for ease of use. Somebody wanted something a little simpler to use. They didn't like configuring files in the command line, so they got a Synology NAS or something that has the DNS service, which you're more than welcome to each his own. For us, for now, we're gonna just take an example and we're gonna actually do just verbatim. We're gonna type $TTL tab, that's what the space is in between that, and 1D, and then enter at tab capital IN tab SOA tab. Actually, these should not be tabs, this should just be space. SOA, and then here's where we're going to type just the name of the server, the host name as it should be, and then whenever you're doing configurations in DNS, any host name needs to have a period behind it. It's kind of like the whole semicolon thing in the previous step that we did. Here, it looks kind of weird. You're looking at .com dot, but that basically ends the host name. That tells DNS that that is the end of the host name with nothing behind it. And then you can do root. I think this is where the email address goes, so we're just going to do that again, dot, and then we're going to do parentheses because now we're opening the actual configuration. So how do we do this? So let's tab over and let's see if we can figure this out. This date, the It's actually a serial number, right? So how the serial field is, you want to basically do it in the form of year. So 4-digit year, 2-digit month, 2-digit date, and then there's 2 digits behind that tell you what version it is. Every time you make a change to DNS, to your forward zones or reverse zones, you have to increment the serial number to a greater number than what it previously was, right? But let's say you're making changes 10 times a day because some massive astronomical change took place on your network, and you have to continuously edit your forward zones and your reverse zones. That serial number has to increase. Otherwise, you're going to have problems. So in this case, we're going to do today's date, which is November 26th. So 4-digit year. We're going to do 11/26, right? And then we're going to do 01. Okay? The 01 at the end is the unique identifier. If I don't make any more changes for this day, then that 01 can stay. Say I go back tomorrow, which I probably won't. But if you had to, you could ultimately take that 6 and make it a 7, for tomorrow, and then you would have a higher number value for the serial number. So, and actually, you actually break this down. So that, and then the refresh period, you can do this in human readable. So, I usually just say, 1 hour, which might be a little excessive. But this is going to be, refresh. And then after that is your retry counter. I feel like I need to organize this a little bit better. Just to give it some space. Because I'm kind of yeah. Oops. And then this is going to be retry. You can see how I'm lining it all up. And then how about 1 week for expire, and then 3 hours or so, actually 1 hour for minimum, 1 U in minimum. Yeah, make sure you spell stuff right. If you don't, expect to be getting a cup of coffee so you can troubleshoot this. Whatever you messed up on. Okay, so we have that. Now we're going to do a line that says in NS. So, and actually I don't want the tab. NS. This is going to be now tabbed. DNS 01.6footnetworks.com. Dot. What is that? That is our first entry for the name server. That's what NS stands for. And then after that, we're going to actually give it the host name. So DNS 01, and then in A, and then we're going to do the IP address of 192.168, and heaven forbid I lost that posted. Oh no, it's right there. 93.138. I've done that so many times I can't even tell you. Okay, now notice that the IP address does not have a dot on it, because computers already know that IPv4 only has 4 octets. There's nothing behind the last set of numbers. Okay, that's it for the forward. This is literally just for this. We're not adding any other hosts to this, and I'm not going past this. But basically what you would do is you would continue to add hosts. You would type the host name under DNS, and then tab in space A indicating a record, which is what an IPv4 DNS record is. There's also quadruple A records, which are for IPv6. There's CNAMEs, there is aliases, which is a CNAME. There is MX records for mail exchangers that email systems use to relay messages back and forth. So there's a lot of information about DNS, specifically online. So now we're going to nano the reverse zone. Oops, autocomplete gave me a little too much. And then we're going to do this all over again. The reverse is literally $TTL, and then 1D, new paragraph, at tab in, oops, space, SOA, space, DNS 01.6, oops, 6, networks.com, dot. And then this is going to, again, this is exactly the same as the forward zone. Just the records are backwards, so I'm going to just keep typing without really saying much here, just to get this out. Refresh, and then now these values also, I should mention, are specific to your environment, and if you need to do more research on them, I would recommend that you do so. These are all values that specifically dictate how your DNS server handles records and caching specifically. Alright, here's where the fun part starts. You only use the last digit, and that's it. And then reverse records are called pointer records, or PTR records. Okay. So you might also notice that I did not put a period after the .com in the pointer record, because that is part of the line for the actual pointer record. It's not part of the configuration like it is above. So what are we looking at here? In fact, let me break this down real quick. So SOA up top is start of authority. So that defines pretty much the global parameters for the zone or the domain. One resource record can be specified within the line with the SOA keyword, which is our fully qualified domain name, which is what you see there, and the email address behind it. The $TTL, or the time to leave, is by default, actually it's time to live, I believe, is by default 1 day, or what is it? I think it's 86,400 seconds by default. That's what the 1D stands for. You know, you should shorten that if you make a lot of changes. So 1D is literally 86,400 seconds. That's how many seconds there are in a day. Did you know that? Let's see. So, yeah, that TTL is what tells the DNS server, or it tells it how long to cache any information that it retrieves. So, time to live, 1 day. And then, of course, remember that the fully qualified domain names in the configuration, not in the zone records, but in the configuration, ends with a dot. So, like dns01.6footnetworks.com dot. Don't forget that dot. And then, you know, of course, the email address, and then the serial field. You know, the serial field literally is, in practice, there to track changes in the zone file. And it literally is in the form of year, month, date, and then the 2-digit unique number to that day. And that's it. Control X, yes, return. Now what are we going to do? So we just literally set up a fully functioning server. We could have gone forth and added more records into this, but I'm not going to go that far because this video is already long enough and I feel like my audience is sleeping. So let's make sure that the permissions are correct for DNS. So we're going to chgrp named, and then we're going to just give it the var named forward zone, because I created those outside of the system. So chgrp named, and then var named reverse zone. So now named has group permissions over it, and now, you know, kind of the last step is to really check if you've screwed stuff up. So there's a command that's called named or named check zone, and then you put your domain in there, and then show it the path, which is var named forward zone, and then look at that. So zone is loaded with the serial number of that, which is today's date, plus the 01, which is unique to today or this instant, and the next line it says it's okay. And then what we can do is we can also check the reverse by typing in, I'm trying to remember if it's, I believe it's going to be the IP address, but I believe it's forward. So let's do 192.168.1.1 .93.138 and then var named reverse zone, and guess what? It loaded it, and it's okay. Guess what? We have a working DNS server. So, and it normally would not have taken an hour to do, because a lot of this stuff is copy and paste typically, and if you're SSHing into a server, it's a much better experience than actually sitting at the console where you can only type. If you're using a terminal emulator to secure shell into a system that's going to become a server, you have the full functionality of copy and paste. So you can literally go through a notepad, set up your configurations and whatnot, and then paste them in, and then you just issue these last two commands to check and make sure that your stuff is correct, and that's it, literally. So what we're going to do is actually check, we're going to do check conf, because I want to check the configuration, and then oops, oh yeah, okay, so it's telling me that it is correct, although that's not the output I was expecting, but that's fine. And then guess what? We get to reload the service. Did it not? Huh. See, this is where things get funny. Failed because the control product exited with an error code. I wonder what kind of error code that was. I thought we had... Let me see if I can... System CTL. Let's see what this tells me, because I'm dying to know what I screwed up on. Failed to start. Oh, look at that. What's missing? Remember how I was preaching? Don't forget your semicolons? Well, I'll be damned. Alright, so Control X, or Control C, sorry. Let's go back and go back in here. I don't remember which one it was, so we're going to, named.conf. It actually tells me that right there, name.conf, and I'm missing in line 11 and 19 oh god, okay. So embarrassing. Sure enough. You'd figure that I've been doing this forever, that I would know what I'm doing, right? Sorry. I literally forgot that. Okay. But this is how we do it. You see it with your own eyes. Now we're going to restart. No errors. Cool. Now, does it work? Well, we can use a utility called dig, and then let's say I might be a little ambitious here with that. 93.138. So in theory, what I'm asking this machine to do is to find google.com at our new DNS server. That's what the @ symbol is with the IP address of the DNS server. In hitting return, we should get something back that's, you know, decent. And guess what? It worked. So it tells us what server, under server, when, message size, how long it took to query, and also you know, what kind of answer it was. So it looks like it works. Google.com. It resolves to. I don't see the IP address, but maybe we can do it like this. 93. I don't know if that'll work. I don't think that'll work. Nope. I think I just made it. Yeah. So there's your actual google.com addresses. So we know it works. We know the service starts. But let's see, maybe I can do this a little bit easier for it. So let's say dig DNS 01.6 foot networks. Oops, networks.com. This should come back with the IP address. Yeah, I should have done this beforehand. So here in this section here, you can see we're questioning what's the IP address of DNS01.6footnetworks.com. The answer section is DNS01 is for the next 86,400 seconds, which is 1 day, 192.168.93.38. So there's your answer. Who's the authority? For the next 86,400 seconds, it is DNS01.6footnetworks.com. There's how long it took to query the server. There's the server we questioned, denoted with port number 53 behind the IP address, when and how big the message size was, so on and so forth. That is it. You can now literally go forth. Oh, and look, the hostname changed to DNS01. You can literally go forth and use the server, add your records in. I even believe that the server would work as it stands if you don't have anything on your network. You know, if you have something on your network that you want to access from within your network, then you should put the A records in to the zone files. But basically, we just went through a complete A to Z install. Took a little bit over an hour to do. Always plan for pitfalls, because if you forget a semicolon or a period or a bracket, or you spell something wrong, then you're going to be sitting there troubleshooting it. Feel free to reach out. I love engaging with my community. You can reach us at www.6footnetworks.com, or you can just post a comment below. You know, give us a like. You know, feel free to subscribe. Hoping to do more of these videos coming up. With the holidays around the corner, the next video might be a little bit delayed, spending time with family and whatnot, but it is around the corner. And feel free to send us an email to info@6footnetworks.com, SIXFOOTNETWORKS.com, and let us know if you want us to do something, to come up with you know, a video or some content or something. My team is going to resume its operations after the new year. We're not doing any new projects for the rest of this year. It's holiday season, and most of our guys are scattered all over the world. So they took a break. So it's literally just me. Please be patient with any emails or comments or anything. I will get back to you. It just might take me a little bit to do so. But anyway, in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed this video, and I hope it helps you out. Take care. God bless. Happy holidays. Happy Thanksgiving. And until the next time, take care.